Today, we become legends.
With Smite 1's God roster seemingly complete with the release of Nut, any future God releases to look forward to will likely be for Smite 2. Here's my list of 10 gods or mythological beings I want to see added in the future of Smite. Let's jump in. So first up is Mordred from the Arthurian pantheon. We have King Arthur, his sister Morgana, his best friend and protector Merlin, and one of his most esteemed knights in Lancelot, but the pantheon will never feel complete without Mordred. As the one who slays Arthur in almost every retelling of the Arthurian legend, having Mordred in the game will give a strong sense of completion to this pantheon. Even though these gods are for Smite 2, I'll still be using the general class identifiers from Smite 1 to give a brief overview of what role the god in question would fill, and I think the only role for Mordred is that of an assassin. He can absolutely have some mixed scaling and minor magical effects in his kit, but would be mostly strength focused. I think many of the new Smite 2 gods should have long voiced interactions like Arthur and Merlin or Horus and Set do in Smite 1, but Mordred especially should have some kind of lengthy word battle with Arthur if he was ever implemented in Smite 2. The Lady of the Lake in Arthurian legend has several names, the most popular being Nimue, so you could either use that name or simply call her the Lady of the Lake in Smite 2. She is an enchantress who gets her title from residing in a castle deep beneath a magical lake that surrounds the island of Avalon. She is most important for giving the sword Excalibur to King Arthur and being the foster mother of Lancelot, who trained him, sent him to join the Knights of the Round Table, and protects him from afar using magical enchantments. Along with Mordred, I feel like adding the Lady of the Lake would truly complete the Arthurian pantheon. Sure, you could have other knights like Gawain, Galahad, or Percival, but at some point you're going to run out of ways to differentiate them, as I think they would almost all be warriors. The Lady of the Lake, though, I think would work amazing as an enchanter support mage that focuses on buffing allies and debuffing enemies rather than being tanky with tons of hard CC. And of course, some kind of interaction with Lancelot would be essential here, and maybe even a small one with Arthur at game start about how he got his sword. Okay, forgive me for my Lovecraft knowledge for this one, as it does not go as deep, pun intended, as my knowledge of other pantheons. But with Cthulhu being the most popular Smite release of all time and tons of other beings to explore in Lovecraftian mythos, adding at least one other would be essential for Smite 2 in my opinion. It doesn't have to be Yog-Sothoth, it could be Azathoth or Nyarlathotep or any of the other crazy beings from Lovecraft, but we need at least one more in my opinion. Yog-Sothoth is generally seen as an omniscient floating mass of orbs and eyes that exists outside the universe and sees all of space and time at once. Of course, as with many Lovecraftian gods, you couldn't implement him into Smite with 100% lore accuracy, but hear me out here. What if Yog-Sothoth completely breaks the mold and has some way of interacting with the map and fights from anywhere at any time? You could go whole hog with this and make it so he doesn't really exist on the battlefield but just influences fights from the sky or from the fountain, but that might be a bit too far, so maybe just an ultimate that lets him do something similar. There might be an overlap with Cthulhu here in terms of design, but I feel like there could be a really cool way to implement an omniscient being that exists outside of the universe within Smite. Baldur is the god of light, son of Odin, and brother of Thor in Norse mythology, and is one of the most popular gods in mainstream culture, so I feel his addition into Smite would be great for the game. He is most known for his invulnerability to anything but mistletoe, which could be implemented in the form of an ultimate that probably makes him completely immune to everything except one weakness. This could be stuns or another kind of hard CC, or you could make him immune to physical damage but weak to magical during the ult, or even immune to basic attacks but weak to abilities, or vice versa. I don't really have an exact way I'd want his invulnerability implemented, but it has to be there in some way, and I think going more literal with it rather than what they did for Achilles will be way cooler for Smite 2. He could also have significant interactions with Loki, who tricked the blind god Hod into throwing mistletoe at Baldur, which is what killed him in the legends. You could even make it so every other Norse god cheers and simps for Baldur if they're on his team at game start to reference how he was the most beloved god in Norse mythology. Sticking with the Norse theme, my next addition would be Mani, who is the brother of Sol and personification of the moon. Just like Sol, Mani is eternally chased across the sky by one of Fenrir's sons, which is said to cause the movement of the moon in the sky, as it does with Sol and the sun. This sibling pair are often said to be opposites, with Sol being fiery, passionate, and lively, while Mani is calm, collected, and subdued, much like the sun and moon themselves. This could lead to some very funny lore interactions at game start, in my opinion. In terms of visuals, I think making Mani mirror Sol's design, but with more silvers and blues instead instead of reds and oranges would make perfect sense. For the kit, I honestly have no idea for this one. Much like Sol, Manny has very little to go on in terms of how he would fight because he is just said to be eternally riding across the sky in his chariot to escape the wolf Hati and is really just the personification of the moon. It could be interesting to make him a much more physical based god than Sol though, to contrast the opposing nature of the two siblings. Or you could contrast them by making Manny still magical but more of a supportive character, which would fit more with the lore as moonlight is generally more associated with healing and mysticism compared to sunlight, which of course can heal but also burns. Thanks, Ra. Izanagi in Japanese mythos is the husband of Izanami, and the two are said to have created the islands of Japan by raising them from the sea. He is also the father of the troublesome trio of Amaterasu, Susanoo, and Tsukuyomi. Having Izanagi join the roster will complete this family and could lead to even more lore interactions between these 5 characters than the ones that already exist in Smite 1. In terms of gameplay, it's a fairly loose connection, but Izanagi is often seen as a creator deity who used his legendary spear, Ame no Nuboko, sorry if I butchered that, to churn the seas of the earth and raise Japan. He then married Izanami and fathered many children, of which the people of the earth are said to be descended. One of these children actually killed Izanami, and while in Yomi, the Japanese equivalent of the underworld, she partook in the food of Yomi, and when Izanagi came to rescue her, she was twisted with rotting flesh and covered with maggots. This is the depiction of Izanami we get in Smite. To save the world from Izanami's escape from Yomi, Izanagi sealed the entrance with a giant boulder. It would be cool to add Izanagi as a melee physical god with summoning aspects. He could wield his legendary spear as a warrior or assassin, but also be able to summon various beings within his kit to reference his creation lore. Other than loose connections with Set and Bastet, we don't really have any melee physical summoners in Smite, and I think this could be a cool way to add one. As a child of Nyx, Nox's Greek equivalent, and the brother of Thanatos, Hypnos is the god of sleep in Greek myth. He would ascend from Erebos, the land of darkness, each night into the skies of the earth. He often wields a horn filled with opium to induce sleep and a poppy stem dripping with the water of the river Lethe to symbolize forgetfulness. He also is sometimes said to wield an inverted torch that sucks in light rather than giving it out. There's a lot to work with here in terms of making a cool magical intelligence-based mage or support kit here, in my opinion. You have darkness elements that could use his torch to blind enemies similar to Loki's 2 in Smite 2. A powerful mesmerize would be essential here too as the god of sleep, and you could maybe even go crazy and implement his forgetfulness aspects by allowing one of his abilities to completely disable a specific enemy ability for a few seconds as they forget how to use it. This could be their ultimate or one of their basic abilities, or even a passive if that wouldn't cause too much programming nightmares, pun intended. There's a lot you could do with Hypnos as probably a supportive character, but he could even work as a mage with more supportive aspects, similar to Hecate's rework design for Smite 2. Next up is Enkidu, once rival turned friend to Gilgamesh in Babylonian myth. Adding Enkidu would feel like a good completion of the most famous trio from these myths. We have Gilgamesh and Ishtar, it's time for Enkidu to join the fray. He should definitely be depicted as the bull man with the head, body, and arms of a man, but the horns, ears, tails, and legs of a bull. There would of course be some amazing long-form dialogue potential at game start with Gilgamesh here, and I can only imagine Enkidu would also be a warrior in Smite. As far as I know, he's not known for wielding any particular weapon, and with his bull man depiction, you could make him a brawler of sorts, with powerful punches and bull kicks that could maybe even give him a minor niche, as a god that can easily hit behind himself for massive damage. Maybe even a dash that allows him to charge in, get behind someone, and reverse bull kick them backwards in a parallel to Gilgamesh's dropkick. There's not a lot to go on in terms of what Enkidu's kit should be in Smite, but I feel like his addition would be a great way to add more depth to the Babylonian pantheon in-game. As one of the more popular Greek gods, Demeter was the goddess of the harvest and mother to Persephone. As the well-known tale goes, Persephone was abducted by Hades into the underworld where she ate 6 pomegranate seeds before Zeus came to rescue her for Demeter. As the seeds tie the eater to the underworld, Persephone had to remain there for 6 months of the year but could return to the earth for the other 6 months, which explains the seasons and harvest cycle. As for 6 months, Demeter was distraught while Persephone remained in the underworld and the harvest withered, but for the other 6 months she was elated with joy and the harvest bloomed. Persephone has to a certain extent already taken the role of a farming goddess in Smite, but especially with her rework she has shied away from it a little, so Demeter could swoop in as a true representative of that archetype and have a large focus on minigaming with various seeds, plants and crops that she tends to throughout the match. You could even lean her into a jungle role where she plants various crops throughout the jungle, and as she returns to farm the next rotation of camps, the seeds will have matured and she can harvest them for buffs, extra gold, whatever really. You could also have some of the seeds be traps that enemies can get caught in as they traverse the jungle. There's a lot to explore here, but I think leading into the farming and crops aspect is essential if Demeter were to be added to Smite. And finally, we have Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of Egyptian mythology associated with disease, war, healing, and medicine, much like her associated item in Smite 1. She shares a lot of design space with Bastet, but I think could occupy a cool niche as an aggressive physical assassin, but with strong team healing capabilities as well. This will represent her dual nature of being a fierce and terrifying goddess to her enemies, but a nurturing and healing goddess to her friends. But that's it for 10 gods I want to see added to Smite 2. What do you guys think of my picks? Are there any I didn't mention that should absolutely make it to Smite 2 in your opinion? Let me know down below, and I'll catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.